Alright, welcome back. So, today I'll be doing something that is slightly different. What I'll be doing is that I'll be going through, or rather I'll be doing an analysis of a video from Avatar the Last Airbender. But I'll be breaking down the video from a psychological perspective. Or maybe not so much of a psychological perspective, but more towards what can we learn and abstract from this particular clip. So if I were to give a preface of this clip is about this animal companion of the main character, and they have been separated because something happened, and because of that this animal companion is trying to find its way back to the main character. But the whole idea is that the nature of this animal companion is gentle, right? However, what happened in this particular episode prior to this clip is it encountered certain or multiple instances of event that is traumatic in nature. So because of that, where this clip begin, he, or I believe is a he, right? But let's say it is in a state of emotional distrust, right? And this clip basically shows the interaction between this animal companion and another character, which is a wise guru. So this analysis will be from the perspective of what can we learn in terms of this whole video. Right, what did the guru did well, what you can abstract and utilize in terms of your interaction with people to be more charismatic. So let's get into the video. So at this point, it's just he's wondering, right, because the traumatic event that happened. So what it decided to do is that it is going to fly home, or rather the home where it was brought up, right? Because this is many years into the future since it was born. And if you want to know more, then you have to go watch the show itself. So this is it reminiscing about the memories they had when it was younger. And I think that, like, maybe at the junction, in this junction over here, you can notice that when it comes down to emotion, what gives us a certain level of comfort is for us to recall and reminisce about a better time. And even in terms of whenever we do it, you'll realize that what tends to happen is that we recall a memory, just like how in this video it recalls the memory of it chewing on the bar, but because of that it brings certain emotions of comfort, which is why we do it. And to a certain extent, you can say that the comfort is a form of trying to seek pleasure, because human beings, we interact with the world, although yes, this is not a human being, but it's showing an animal with emotions. So I would say animals in general, including human beings, what tends to happen is that we tend to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So I think in terms of seeking comfort is an aspect of seeking pleasure. So which is why we are emotionally driven, or rather it was emotionally driven to do that. Okay, so maybe I pause here first, right? To give context, when this creature, right, the creature's name is Appa, when Appa saw this silhouette, it gave him the idea, or rather it built the association of this is the main character, because the main character is also a monk, right? It's a young monk that is bald. So when he sees the silhouette, then what the animal perceive, right, what Appa perceive is that, wow, this must be Aang, right? I've reconnected, be it you want to say owner, you want to say master, but this more towards animal companion, right? So maybe you can say that, well, I found my friend after so long of being distant, and it clues you in that that's how human being we actually interact with the world, because we do not interact with the world by just observing everything, right? You can tell that there's a lot of shortcut even in this situation. Or maybe in this case, right, the animal, which human being also do the exact same thing, right? We observe the silhouette and we immediately form perception, right? This is a split second decision. Of course, if we pause and we observe, then we'll see that, well, there's so many signs that this is not the main character, right? Because there isn't any sort of tattoo. The main character may be paler in nature. They're wearing different clothes. The size is different. But what I'm trying to get at is that the reason why, or rather not the reason why, whenever we are in a situation of elevated emotions, in this case, because, well, you can say that what Appa is feeling is the emotion of sadness, right? Because of all the trauma that it has encountered, loneliness, and a lot of this negative emotion, right? So what tends to happen is that when we are in an elevated emotional state, we don't really pay that much attention to the objective reality. And you can see that, it's kind of whenever we associated certain things, such as what we see is the, let's say, Aang, which is the main character. The emotion that was brought up is instantaneous. There is no cause and effect. So it goes back to how emotion actually works. Emotion works on the principle of it is what it is, right? So it's kind of like observe. If this is Aang, then happy emotions.
Hello, I am Guru Patik.
Okay, so I have to pause here because this is the part where it comes down to introduction, right? I think that for human beings, sometimes we put so much emphasis on how do we actually make friends, how do I actually introduce myself. You'll realize that the simplest way, especially when it works on the principle of likability, right? So the whole context of this video is from the perspective of likability, which is the nicer I am, or rather the more the other person like me, the much more likely they're going to do things for me. So the objective of using principle of likability is to get the other party to like us as much as possible, compared to power, which is, well, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to force you to compel to what I want, which is what I think most people subconsciously actually apply when they interact with the world.
I know I'm not the person you expected. And I didn't expect to be licked by a giant tongue just now. The world is full of surprises.
Okay, so this is the part where it's very applicable if you're trying to learn the principle of likability. Just think in terms of what alternative this particular guru could have done. If he's working on the principle of power, then he could say that, well, I'm more powerful than you. Well, of course, in this situation, one is a bison and one is a frail human being. So maybe potentially you can say that there is no power in that case. But what if we were to bring this into real life? If you are interacting with an animal that is scared, how often would people actually take the perception of, well, I'm just gonna go, well, the animal is so scared, so what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna approach it, I'm gonna touch you, and I'm gonna comfort you, because that is what you need, right? And the thing is, this whole principle, of course, human being, we also are able to understand context, right? We will not interact. It's not like if I were to interact with a small animal in this case, I will use the same exact frame when interacting with another human being. So yes, we are able to take in different contexts, But what I'm trying to get at in this situation is that if you're working on the principle of likability, you must never ever breach the other person's sense of autonomy. So in this situation, when there's a conflict, right, the issue of how this guru solve this whole interaction is, instead of seeing that, okay, wow, you're uncomfortable, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to continue to push, right? I'm going to try to convince you why I am safe to be around, which this is what people would tend to do, right, in a real life interaction, and the results of that is that they get perceived as creepy. Right, the situation, if you want to know about likability and how this is going to apply, is that you must remember this one thing. At any point of time, if you interact with another human being, let's say hypothetically, right, you're a guy and you are trying to attract a girl, you're trying to interact with a girl, right, you're talking to a shy girl, and you notice that the certain level of discomfort, right, she's backing off, although in real life situation it's not going to be as abrupt as this, which is instantly jumping backwards. In real life situation, it's much more likely to be subtle. Like, if you were to lean in a little bit, then you notice that the girl subtly, move back a little bit. If you are able to notice that, then you must realize that the right way to actually approach that situation is exactly as what you see in this situation, right? If he's leaning up, if he realized that leaning up caused the other party to become more defensive, then the right decision in this situation, is to stop whatever you're doing, right? So if I'm leaning in, I cause the girl to be uncomfortable, then what I want to do is that, then I realize that, I want to give distance. So it's more towards respecting the other person's sense of autonomy. And how this translates in real life interaction is that you must understand that as human beings, we like to think that we own the space around us and we are able to control the space around us. But when two people interact in the same space, then we have something called personal space. And generally, people do not like to have their personal space being intruded upon. Of course, if you're working on the principle of power, then there is value in intruding other people's personal space. But in my opinion, if you want to be a charismatic person, then you work on the principle of likability. Then what you want to do is that if you notice somebody is being uncomfortable, then you want to take a step. You want to take a step back. And in some sense, it's not even the case of retreat. Because it's not like, you are scared, then what I do is that, I backpedal 3 steps. It's more towards like, this step makes you uncomfortable, then I'll just take 1 step back and then continue interaction in this case. And also one point to actually note, right, is that you notice that this interaction, the bison, Appa, is very defensive and it's even aggressive. But the thing that you can take away in this context is that in real life interaction, how many of us in this guru's position, if we interact with somebody and then somebody basically tells us off or maybe can say something that is rude in nature, that instantly make us think that this person must be a bad person, right? If you want to understand people better, then you need to understand that there are contexts. So the context in this situation is that, the bison have experienced a certain level of hurt in the past that caused it to have an instinctual reaction of backing off in order to protect themselves. And the thing is, when it comes down to real human beings, the people that we interact, likelihood people who tends to be more meek, shy, or even if they are not meek and shy, they are instantly aggressive, then usually what would help you is to realize that, logically speaking, if we are on a timeline and where you are is the present, which is you're interacting with them and you see the signs of them backing off at something that is very minor, you must understand that there probably is something that happened in the past that have hurt them and they have adopted this behavior in a way to protect themselves. So it's not so much of they are what's the word I'm looking for, right? It is not that there's this standoff between you and them because they are an asshole or they are a bitch or etc. It's more of they are protecting themselves. And once you realize this, then the thing that you will eventually, the thing that, or rather the behavior you'll eventually adopt is that you stop taking things so personally. Because you start to consider what is the reasoning why this person does this particular thing. And it can be very useful, especially in the context of if you want to get people to like you better. Yeah, so maybe in this junction, the thing that you can take note of, this is a very clear distinction between power and influence. So I want to highlight that what we are observing right now is on influence, right? Influence work on likability. The more that you like me, the much more likely you're going to do something good for me. Power works on the principle of I want control, I want to change your mind, I want to change the situation, I want control of the situation. And the difference between power and influence is that influence is on soft approach. But when you're utilizing soft approach, there is a factor of time. And it can be shown in this video, right? Like this guru basically has to sit there and wait until the other party is comfortable. In this situation, the other party is asleep, right? Which can be characterized as being relaxed. So this is the distinction between power. There are certain situations that you have to utilize power, especially if time is of the essence. So if let's say time is not of the essence, which I think majority of interaction is not particularly time sensitive, then what you can actually do is that you can actually take a step back and relax and wait until the person is in a more comfortable situation.
Oh dear. You've been through so much recently. Hurt and betrayed. So twisted up inside. You're still full of love. But fear has moved in where trust should be. I've been expecting you in the young Avatar for quite a long time. I had a vision many years ago of helping him. That's why I came to the Eastern Air Temple. Oh, your emotions are so turbulent, like swirling storm clouds. Let the clouds in your mind be gentle, peaceful ones.
Okay, so at this junction, there's few things, right? I think this scene serves few purposes. One is, of course, is to give people, or rather clue people into the emotional state of Appa. Because keep in mind that this particular cartoon is made for children. Of course, this cartoon is actually have a lot of philosophical lessons that you can learn in terms of spirituality and in redemption. So there's actually a lot of lessons that you can learn from this particular show itself. It's a really good show if you really do want to explore more towards philosophy. But in this case, it's more of, I think that it serves the idea of giving the context to viewers who may not be as observant. But beyond that, what it actually shows is that it shows that when you interact with people, especially from the point of likability, you have to have more empathy. So you have to be empathetic about the situations that would probably bring this person here. Of course, this show is more towards the whole idea of magic, right? There's magic in this show. So later on, you can also see that there are other applications of this. But if we were to bring it into real life, then I think what tends to happen is that there is aspects of feelings that is not as direct and can be understood or quantifiable. There is going to be aspects of feelings that is if I were to use an example, it's just putting your hand on somebody, having the physical contact, and be able to feel and intuit the other person's feeling to a certain extent. Of course, how much you trust the accuracy of this action is arguable, because there are other aspects or other principles that you can utilize to actually read the emotion of other person and infer their mental state. The example that I'll use is body language, right? If you utilize body language, then you probably will be able to tell to a certain extent how this person is feeling. But at the end of the day, this particular clip of it, it's more to show that this character, which represents the character or represents influence, so to speak, is that you have to be empathetic about the experience of the other person.
Someone looks very well rested, judging by your bed head.
Okay, so this is something that, again, we can draw contrast between power and influence. When it comes down to power, there are situations who people who think that they are empathetic and maybe to a certain extent they have the best intention in mind, but they are still interacting with the world from the perception of power. So for example, what we saw in the clip was that the guru have placed food on the trail to eventually lead Appa here, where the monk or the guru is meditating. This is exemplary of how influence works. You are using things that people desire in order for you to get them to do what you want. So in this situation, it's leaving a trail of cabbages. It's the whole idea of like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and eventually, next thing I know, you are here, right? Whereas in terms of power, people can be very forceful. If we are using the context of animals, for example, there is an alternative of, well, I care about you so much, and probably you haven't eaten. So when you wake up, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have to force cabbage down your throat, or I'm going to shove cabbage in your face. Yeah, this is good for you, this is good for you, eat. And I'm such a nice person because I'm caring for your well-being. I do think that in that situation, it's the feelings of being caring is being misconstrued. Because again, there is one key principle that is very important to keep in mind when it comes down to applying sense of the principle of likability, is that you must never ever breach the sense of autonomy. The other person have to think or feel that they are in 100% control of the interaction. So which is why what you want to do is that you want to leave things that they potentially want to lead them to where you want them to be, instead of forcing it upon them, right? Because if I leave you a trail and you follow the trail because you are following your desires, then people will feel like, well, I'm doing the action not because another person have manipulated me into doing this, but it's more towards that I want to do all these things, right? I want to eat the cabbages and I want to follow this trail, and next thing you know, you brought them to a place where that's exactly the outcome that you want, right? But the whole idea is that subtle. You have to be subtle. Okay, I think that this particular part is important because we can contrast this with real life interaction, and especially when it comes down to a guy wanting to pursue a girl, or even if you're a girl wanting to pursue a guy. The issues when it comes down to attraction, right, is that very seldom we actually consider what the other person is feeling. One example is previously in this video, if the other person is uncomfortable with your advances, then what you want to do is that, well, you want to back off a little bit. But you don't see it as like, oh, there is a pushback, then what it means that this person must hate me, this person is ready to reject me. Then what I do is that I turn tail and I run as far as possible so this person cannot reject me. It is not the case. It is just that, I realize there's resistance. Then what I do is that I take a step back, but I still put myself in the situation for the other person to be comfortable. And the whole idea of sometimes what mistake we make when it comes down to interacting with girls is some of us will actually push an agenda, right? Which is pursue the girl in accordance to our feelings, which is like, well, I really like you, so I'll go up to you, I'll talk to you right now, how are you? I'm gonna shower you with like compliments and everything like this. But that's not the case. Usually what we want to do is that there is an aspect when it comes down to interaction with both party or people in general, is the whole idea of safety. How safe is this person to be around? Can I be in their presence without worrying that they will force what they want upon me? So if I were to give a contrasting example in this particular clip, is the whole idea of the reason why Appa is able to trust the guru so quickly. Maybe it's not quickly, maybe this happened in the course of days, but the reason why it trusts the guru eventually, despite all the hurt that have happened to it in the past, is that the guru always respect Appa's space. It's like, oh, you don't want to interact with me right now? Well, that's perfectly fine. It's okay, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that, well, I hate you or I turn tail and run and I find some way to punish you. It's just that, like, well, how about you put yourself in a situation where you're more relaxed, you're more calm, then you can interact with me whenever you want, whenever you deem that it is safe for you to do so. So is this aspect of, again, you are respecting the other person's autonomy, right? You interact with me when you're comfortable, but I do not find a way to punish you if I were to see any sort of pushback. So if let's say I approach you, I talk to you, then I notice that, like, well, you're very uncomfortable in the situation because you are shy and maybe bad things have happened to you in the past, and therefore you interact with the world in this very, like, I'm scared of strangers kind of way. Then what I do is that, I don't find a way to punish you. Oh, wow, you don't want my advances? Then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to leave, right? Screw you. I hope that you have a terrible day. It's just more of like, well, I respect that probably something have happened to you in the past. Well, I'm sorry that I intruded into you. You don't have to verbalize your apology, right? But you just understand that, like, well, it's not this person's fault that they are scared, but you just stay there and wait, right? Of course, in real interaction, it's not stay there and wait. It's you take a step back and then you talk and interact with them in the way that's comfortable, right? Maybe you talk about things that they enjoy, their passion, the things that they find importance, or like, what hobbies they have. People tend to relax over talking about things that they are comfortable with, right? Then it's only through multiple interaction with this person, respecting their space, then the next thing you know is that eventually people start to open up to you. People start to be able to relax in your presence because they realize that, well, I can interact with this person, right? I can interact with Ilong, but Ilong is not going to suddenly try to impose, right? He's exert certain sort of force into his environment, right? He's not going to suddenly decided that, like, you have to interact with me right now in this particular way or otherwise I'm going to leave, right? So it's the whole idea of creating a very relaxing environment that people can be around you and interact with you at the pace they feel comfortable, which I think the key word in this whole point is that comfort is very important if you do not want to be perceived as creepy. You must always be mindful of how you make the other person feel. And the whole idea is that if I observe that this person is being uncomfortable, then generally what you want to do is that you do not want to attribute the discomfort and blame of the discomfort on the other person and continue doing what you're going to do, right? It's much more better, or rather it's better for you to take a step back and just understand that people act in a way that they do because of a reason. And if you are able to relax and you're able to wait and be patient, they'll eventually open up to you.
I have prepared a message for Anne. May I attach it to your horn?
Okay, so this is also something that you want to pay attention to, which is most people interact with the world in a very forceful way. Sometimes even very, very minor things such as like asking permission for very, very little things can go a long way in making yourself be perceived as more likable. Of course, people also see it as like, well, if I ask for permission, people are going to think that I'm weak and they're going to take advantage of me. There are certain truth to that. Because I think that if you were to interact with the world in truly in a way of pure likability with zero consideration of power, the principle of power, right? Then I think that what tends to happen is that people will probably want to take advantage of you. But again, I have seen personal examples of it, which is if you are able to get everybody to like you, then you basically creates a power for yourself in the sense of you have the power of influence. And think in terms of somebody who is well liked by everybody around them in their environment. It is not as simple of, well, this person seems to be very easy to bully, so I'm going to bully this person. Human being works on the whole idea of, or rather I'll say the principle of likability works on the idea of the more that I like you, the more I'm willing to do good things for you, is because of tribe mentality. When we interact with somebody and the more that we like them, what it basically means is that we see certain similarities between us and that particular person. And it's because of these similarities, whenever we do good things for them, it is as if, or it feels like, we are doing the good thing for ourselves. But it's within reasons, right? So you might be willing to empty your bank account to save yourself from a medical condition, but you're not likely to empty your bank account to save somebody else. But if comparing a stranger, where will you pay $50 to save a stranger? Most people, or rather I would say mass majority of people, which can be described as most people, would not be willing to fork out the $50. But then if they change the context to, well, this is your best friend, then maybe you'll be like, yeah, I'll be willing to pay $50. I may not empty my bank account, but I'll be willing to pay $50. So it's the whole idea of being able to see ourselves in the other person. So if you're somebody who is well liked by other people, you'll realize that bullies are very unlikely to be able to pick on you, because picking on you would make everybody who like you perceive that interaction as if the bully is picking on them. So you basically become, it's a power in itself, right? Because people would risk getting on your bad side. Getting on your bad side is equivalent to a certain extent offending everybody around you, so to speak, right? If it makes sense. But maybe going back to the whole idea of this, right? Simple example or simple advice in this thing, or the things that we can learn here, is just ask permission. It is not difficult, right? It gives the other person the sense of control. And very often it makes the other person feel more comfortable because you don't intrude on their sense of autonomy. Could the monk as easily just tie the thing on Appa's horn once he observed that, okay, Appa seems to be comfortable around him? Yes, he could, right? Or rather, I think I said monk, right? But this guy is a guru. Yes, the guru could, but he didn't, right? He asked for permission. He gave the control and power to Appa, and this action probably makes Appa feel better compared to if he were to just do it without asking. So this is something that we can learn definitely in our face-to-face interaction with the world.
You and the Avatar's energies are mixed. You have an unbreakable bond. By reading your energy, I can sense where Aang is. Funny what invisible strings connect us all.
Okay, so perhaps I'll stop the clip over here, but just to give you a short idea from until the end of this clip, maybe like 20 minutes, not 20 minutes, like maybe 20-30 seconds to the future, then what happened towards the end is the guru, using the connection between Appa and the main character Aang, is able to help figure out where Aang is and is able to convey the information to Appa. So Appa is actually going towards the direction to find Aang, right? But eventually at the end of this clip, then what happened is that Appa got captured by some people, right, the antagonists. And if you want to know more about how this ends up, then I'll suggest you go watch the show. But going back to the whole point of being able to find somebody through the connectivity, right? Which is this statement of the invisible thread that connects us all, the strings that connect us all, right? I think that this is more towards something that is spiritual in nature. And I do believe that the sources of all our ideas comes from the collective unconscious, which can be said to be a stream of consciousness that connects all of us. But this is more towards belief and spirituality. Not so much of religion, because I don't think I believe this in the case of religion. It's just how I interact with psychology that gets me into this point. But the whole idea is that I think this aspect of using the connections between all of us to find objective information of where somebody is fictional caricature of the system. So obviously what I'm saying is that I'm probably sure that you can't just feel the connection between people and then find the other person in that way, right? This is not how human beings work. But there is still a certain truth of we are connected. We are all connected to each other in a certain way. And if you are able to utilize beliefs to a certain extent, you would be able to use the connections between you and the other person to send certain messages. Of course, it is not going to be conscious messages, right? It's not going to be like, SMS messages. But if you believe certain thoughts, these thoughts and this belief in an interaction with another person can be felt by the other person. So for example, if let's say you are truly comforting your friend, right? Because something traumatic happened to your friend, then you being there and the genuine feeling of sympathy that you have can actually be felt by your friend. And I think that people who were in those situations are able to relate to it to a certain extent. So in this case, what I do want to highlight is that there are aspects of psychology that goes beyond empirical and scientific data. Of course, for me, I would want to trust empirical and scientific data more than things that is make-believe and emotional in nature. But the whole idea is that if you really want to understand psychology and you want to have that breadth of knowledge that allows you to read people and basically see everybody as if they are transparent, right? What is important to them, what personality, what they value, etc., then this is an aspect that eventually you have to learn. But in any case, this is going to be it for this video. I know that this video is a little bit different. I think that I'm also a little bit long-winded. I'm not sure if I let the video run long enough, and did I over-explain a lot of things? Do let me know your thoughts about this, because this is the first time I'm doing this type of videos. I would and I intend to do more of this type of videos in the future, because whenever I explain context or concepts of psychology, of different techniques such as the mirroring sense of importance, usually what I have to do is that I have to create an example out from nowhere, right? But what I do want people to understand is that lessons for psychology, or rather lessons for anything in particular, can always be observed from the environment around us. and it can be observed from something as simple as a children's show. So I hope you enjoyed this, and do let me know your thoughts about this if you have any, and hope you enjoy it. If nothing else, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.